Hi, good evening. All of you are here today because you fiercely believe in your child's potential. You want him or her to get the best education possible. And won't you all breathe a huge sigh of relief once that acceptance letter lands in your mailbox? I know I did. Back in 2011, my son got accepted into his dream college. And I want to take you on a little journey tonight and share with you how that dream quickly became a nightmare, and how we worked together, and I helped create a system that supported him, led him to a successful college career, and now is helping other kids. This is my son, Anthony. Since he was a baby, Anthony had his eyes on the sky. Unlike most kids who ran around holding fluffy stuffed animals, Anthony always carried a little tiny airplane with him. Airplanes have been his passion forever. In high school, Anthony was a solid, but not a stellar student. Math was always really hard for him, and oftentimes he didn't really connect socially with a lot of other mainstream kids who were into average things like sports and whatnot. For Anthony, it was always about airplanes. But with a lot of hard work and due diligence, he made it successfully through high school and was well poised onto the college track. In April of 2011, his dream came true. In our mailbox landed an acceptance letter from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And Embry-Riddle is one of the leading private aeronautical and aerospace universities in the country. I will never forget the day that I moved him into his dorm. Unlike all other parents, I roll in with my 27+ bags from Bed Bath & Beyond, and I unpack his room, and I get everything looking perfect. Everything's organized, it's neat, it's tidy. I smile because I know that's probably the only moment in time it's going to be neat and tidy. But be that as it may, it looks perfect, and he's all good to go. We spend the remainder of the day doing a variety of other freshman orientation activities. And then the time comes when I have to drop him off at his dorm. And I will never forget the pit in the bottom of my stomach as I pulled up to that dorm room. And I looked at him, and I said, "How do you feel?" And he looked back at me, and he said, "I'm a little nervous, but I think I'll be okay." And I watched him get out of the car and walk down the pathway. And the door to his dorm opened, and in he went, and then the door closed. I sat in my car, and I cried my eyes out. It was by far the most bittersweet moment of my entire life. And what was so bizarre was that just 3 hours ago, he was this kid who needed help organizing his room. But within seconds, he was on his own. Well, 8 weeks later, Anthony was flunking every single class. Now, it wasn't because he didn't want to be there. This was his dream to go to this school. I will never forget the conversation when I said to him, "Anthony, you got to tell me what's going on. And you can't say you don't know." And we sat there in silence for the longest time. And then finally, he just very quietly said to me, "I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to start." So with that, I knew he was lost. I could tell by the tone in his voice that he was desperate, although he was manifesting himself like he really didn't care. But I knew he did care. I knew there was something very deep going on. So I sought out a couple of educational specialists, and I did a lot of research. And I walked away with 3 things. Number one, he was so overwhelmed that he froze, and he became paralyzed. And what I needed to do was I needed to make his life doable. I needed to make him understand what he needed to do. So the first thing that I did was I learned how to use his learning management system. Now that is a really hard thing to do. In college, syllabuses are in all shapes and sizes. They have this learning management system. It's very hard to access. Things are in all different formats. They're populated all over the place. But I figured it out. I went in and I ripped apart his syllabuses. There are assignments, there's tests, there's a lot of things in them that's not talked about in the classroom. You're just expected to read the syllabus and figure it out. So I broke apart his syllabuses and I tried to make his life seem doable. So I know his learning style, I know his attention span, so I broke everything up into these manageable pieces of time. And I color-coded everything, and I sent him folders and notebooks that matched the color of the classes. And all of these assignments are broken up into manageable little tasks, which I will explain a little bit later. In addition to this, now this is an actual snapshot of his calendar back in 2011, and it's nothing more really than a Google Calendar. I topped that with this document. This is a Word document that I created every night before I went to bed. It's organized by course, and it's basically everything that he needs to do for a given day. And I would send this to him, and he would carry it around on his phone, and he would check off the things that he finished, and then he'd send it back to me. And what he didn't finish, I would then pick up and move to the following day. So my goal in all of this was to let nothing fall through the cracks and to keep him from feeling really overwhelmed. And this document was crazy. There were so many nights I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking, oh my God, the to-do list. And I would stumble into my kitchen and write it up and send it to him. The third thing that I did with this was I attached some apps that sent him reminders, that reminded him when to start assignments. It reminded him when to turn in papers, when things were due, when to study for a test. And I designed this all around his personal habits and preferences. For example, I learned that daily phone calls for me were nothing more than an annoyance, and they were always ignored. He responded so much better to text messages. It was amazing. And when I added the text messaging along with this to-do list that I emailed to him, we began to make progress. And I asked him, I said, Anthony, when you start this, I don't want you to look at the month. I don't want you to look at the week. Can you commit to doing this for just a day? And he said he'd try. So luckily, a day turned into a week, turned into a month. And in the beginning, when he wasn't turning in any assignments, because he wasn't quite sure, he turned it around. He started turning in assignments and getting A's and B's in them. So that led him to a C average his first semester, his freshman year. And he had a C average his second semester, and his sophomore year, he got a B semester. The beginning of his sophomore year, his school sat me down and asked me if I'd write a book about this that they could give to other parents. Now that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard of, because I swore that my kid was the only kid with this problem. And I was literally operating undercover for an entire year, thinking that if somebody found out that I was creating this, they'd kick my kid out of school. Well, when they told me that 95% of their freshmen could use a system like this, I was shocked. Then I started to do my own research, and I did some homework, and the numbers are pretty astounding. What I found out, college tuition rates have gone up 117% over the past 20 years. However, if you look around the room, statistics show that 1 out of 4 kids do not make it back their sophomore year. And we are only graduating 56% of our kids in a 5-year period. The New York Times in 2015, in February, did an article that reported 34% of all freshmen report feeling overwhelmed. And an astounding 9.5% actually report being depressed. The University of Pennsylvania is reporting this as a public health issue. So what is the cost in all of this? Well, kids drop out, or they change majors. 25% of all STEM majors actually end up taking an easier liberal arts major because the transition is too much for them and they're simply overwhelmed. Now, these are our STEM students. These are our kids that are studying science, technology, engineering, and math. They're supposed to be our brightest students. And 25% of them are flipping majors to go with something easier because they're simply overwhelmed and the transition is too much for them. Now that will crush your dreams and devastate your self-esteem. Academic performance at this age, it means everything to a kid. So when you start to fail, and you fail so early, you begin to question, are you smart enough? Are you good enough? It really can change your identity. And the cost to the country is also huge. Colleges lose $16 billion a year in retention. Our student debt sits at $1.2 trillion, and $98 billion of that is in loan deficit because these kids can't graduate and they can't get jobs. And where do we rank as far as college graduation ranks? We're 19th out of 28 countries. We can do so much better than this. Now, I believe that the truth lies and the solution lies in something that most academic institutions don't properly address, and that's executive functioning. Understanding and managing executive functioning is the key to unlocking your child's potential. And how to recognize it and how to work with it is what I want to talk about today. So over the next 30 or 40 minutes, I want to talk about executive functioning, the science of it, the challenges associated with it while your kid is in their junior and senior year in high school, and how it manifests itself when they transition into college. And then I want to tell you some tools and solutions that have worked for my son and now a number of other kids. So executive functioning, it doesn't develop in the prefrontal cortex of your brain until somewhere between the ages of 18 and 26. And it's usually later for boys than girls. Now, the underlying challenge of all of this is its slow pace of development. But how do you know if you have weak executive functioning? Well, here's 5 questions that you can ask. They're super basic. Do you have difficulty starting projects? Homework, cleaning your car, cleaning your room? Do you have a sense, and somewhat accurate sense, of how long it's going to take to accomplish a task? When given the choice, will you finish the work first so you don't have to worry about it and you can go enjoy yourself? Or are you going to enjoy yourself first and put the work off until later? Do you leave things in your tracks, keys, papers, books, and forget where you put them? And lastly, have you ever completed an assignment but forgot to turn it in? Do you see your child? Do you see yourself? Well, guess what? Your child is normal. Now, many of you have probably heard the term executive functioning and maybe have dealt with it in middle school and high school. But many of you haven't. Many of you have these rock star kids that are A students taking AP courses that are highly reliable with no looming issues. And then you send them to college, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like you're building this beautiful, pristine ship. You spend years building it, and you're so proud of it. It's gorgeous. It has 24-karat gold fixtures. It has gorgeous mahogany wood. It has the latest and greatest technology. And you couldn't be more proud when the day comes for you to whack that bottle of champagne on the bow and christen that ship. And you stand there at the dock as you watch this gorgeous ship sail off into the sunset. But when that ship hits the horizon, you quickly think, uh-oh, Nobody knows how to work the navigation system, and your ship gets lost at sea. In other words, your kid doesn't make it past their freshman year. Now, why does executive functioning have a tendency to rear its ugly head in college? Well, because when you're in high school, you have an external structure built around you to support you. You go to school at roughly the same time every day. You're in classes where teachers are talking about homework assignments and tests. Your buddies are in your classroom, and when they get out, they're talking about homework assignments and tests. Your parents are talking about homework assignments and tests. And they're also telling you to clean your room and reminding you that dinner is at 6:30. So everything is built into this external structure. But when you go to college, that structure completely disappears. Now, the challenge in all of this, it does not mean, the good news is that it does not mean that your child is not intelligent. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It's a part of your brain that has yet to develop. Now, the challenge is when it manifests itself and how you react to it. So how does it manifest itself? Number one, planning and organizing. How many of you need to really get into a hazmat suit before you enter into your kid's room? Because it's that messy. Or their backpack. You need gloves to open it up because you don't know what's living inside of there. And there's papers. Everything's disorganized. And if you dig to the bottom, you might actually find an assignment that has yet to be turned in. Or you could be like my kid, not my son, but I also have a daughter. And my daughter, the month of September, I have to save up for the month of September because we go to Staples and she wants to buy every organizational product in that store. We have highlighters, and we have stickers, and we have color-coded files, and we have everything that she could possibly find to get organized. And she tries so hard. But a month in, most of her organization supplies are lost, and her backpack is somewhat of a disaster. The next one is time management. How many of you have heard this before? Oh, come on. It's not that much homework. I just want to chill first. People with underdeveloped executive functioning report procrastination as a problem. They will put something off and put something off until it's literally burning a hole in their behind. Now, they know what they need to do, and they have every intention of doing it. But if it doesn't spark their interest, they will continue to put it off and put it off. Now, let me give you all an example that I think you can relate to. How about our income taxes? How many of us put that off? But we know that April 15th is out there. However, when we sit down to do our income taxes, how many of us need to get up? Maybe go get something to eat before we start. Or we sit down and we need to check our emails one more time. Then we sit down again. And then maybe we need to return that really important phone call, the one that our friend left for us 7 months ago. And if we're super desperate, maybe we will grab our purse and dig around and find an old lifesaver and pop it in our mouth just to bide a little bit more time. But we know, at the end of the day, that April 15th is coming. These kids, April 15th is eons away until it's the night of the 14th. Then it's time to get started. So why do they put everything into what I call the big black backpack of I'll do it later? Because later is when their arousal kicks in. And it's the arousal that gets their attention. The next one is working memory. Working memory is pretty simple, although it has a very long diagnosis. But working memory is the ability to hold multiple things in your mind at one time. So you've got a kid that thinks he has it all dialed. Really smart kid, but holding assignments, test dates, due dates, all in your mind at the same time is really challenging and very, very hard to do. Also, cause and effect affects working memory. Have you ever watched your kid make the same mistake twice? And they do the same thing over and over and over again. And you think, come on, how come you can't learn from your past experiences? Don't you remember that this didn't work last time? Well, the reason why they can't remember it is because it's very hard for them to take something that happened in the past and bring it into their memory and hold it active in their mind while they relate it to something that's happening in the present. It just isn't developed yet. Same goes with reading efficiency. If your working memory is weak, it will affect your reading, because when you read, you have to pull words from your memory and hold the meaning of a word active in your mind while you link that meaning to other words. The next one is initiation of effort. Getting started can sometimes be really hard because they're simply overwhelmed. So for example, in college, you may get assigned a 10-page term paper. And your kid may look at that as a 10-page term paper. And that's overwhelming to think that you need to sit down and write a 10-page term paper. Sometimes they'll sit at their computer screen and just stare at the screen because they've got to write a 10-page term paper. The thought of breaking that down and doing just the outline, that's all they're going to do, is something that doesn't come naturally to them. Now, again, the good news is that this list has nothing to do with your kid's intelligence, although after reading it, you might begin to think so. But it doesn't. The challenge is when it manifests itself and how you support it. Now, I know this because I spent the past 10 years as an executive recruiter. And as an executive recruiter, I have worked with dozens upon dozens of super senior executives. And I can tell you that 80% of them have executive functioning issues. Now, why is that? Because people with executive functioning issues oftentimes are our most creative types of people. But their creative genius cannot be seen until they can specialize and until they're working in an area that interests them. Now, when I started helping my son and building this system, I told a number of executives in Silicon Valley what I was doing. And I was stunned and touched at the same time. I was stunned because so many of them said to me, oh my God, that was me. I barely made it my freshman year. I had to switch majors. It was so hard for me. And then I was touched because I could see the look in their eye and I could see the concern that they had for their own kids and how they were going to get their own kids through this process. So much so that 3 of them actually joined forces with me. And together we are building a product right now that automates all of this. So what this all tells me is that executive functioning is not a deficit in adulthood. But without the proper support, it can be a deficit in college. Now, there's scores of executives, from Jobs to Zuckerberg, who didn't graduate from college. Now, did they not graduate because they weren't smart enough? No, absolutely not. These are our geniuses. But they weren't allowed to show their genius ability. They weren't allowed to shine until they could specialize and until they could create workarounds to support their weak executive functioning, i.e. hire a really good executive assistant. The transition from high school into college is a huge step up in personal responsibility. The term fake it till you make it just does not apply here. And there's no time to create coping mechanisms on the fly. Now, there are many people out there that think you've got to let your kid fail. That's how they're going to learn. You've got to let them fall, you've got to watch them fall, and you just can't pick them up. You have to let them fail. And that's really hard to do as a parent. I mean, that's heartbreaking to do. And in many cases, that is what you need to do. But this is not one of them. This is an area of your brain that has not yet developed. And getting angry at your kid or expecting them to fail and learn through failure is the equivalent of getting angry at a baby who's 10 months old and isn't walking yet and thinking, well, maybe if they fall down the stairs, they'll figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that we need to be helicopter parents. Actually, I'm saying the exact opposite, because that doesn't work at all. In 2013, I spent some time with the University of Tennessee, and they did an interesting study where they found that if you are that helicopter parent and you're constantly hovering around and making everything right, that your kid will actually disengage and their GPA goes down. However, if you provide a subtle amount of support, and I mean subtle here, they are more apt to challenge themselves, take more risks, put themselves out there, try new things socially and academically, and their GPA actually goes up. Now, if you do nothing, chances are they will stop performing. Now, there's a huge stigma in our society that you have to perform well at this age. And if you don't, you are lazy, you're aloof, or you just don't care. Well, it's really unfortunate, because most of these kids, they do care. They care a lot. They're just overwhelmed. And what's even more unfortunate is that colleges will catch this, but they catch it through academic failure. And sometimes it's too late. So now I want to talk to you about 5 tools that can really help support executive functioning without being helicopter-ish, but can really support them until that area of their brain can function on its own. The first thing you need to do is any system that your kid sets into place has to be personal for them. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You can't take something off the shelf and expect your kid to create their lifestyle around it. It needs to be personal. And personalization ensures compliance. That's kind of the key here. So what we did in creating our system is we created it kind of like Match.com, where Match.com asks you a bunch of questions about what you like and don't like, and then they have an algorithm, and they use that algorithm, and they spit you back people that they think you're going to like. Well, we do the same thing. We ask you a number of questions, everything from your sleep habits to when do you like to eat, when do you like to study, how long is your attention span, how long can you sit before you have to take a social media break or you start to fade away. And what are your extracurricular activities? What do you do outside of school? Are you an athlete? Do you work? Do you have tutoring? Do you like to party your brains out on Friday and Saturday nights and you don't want to do anything on Sunday? If that's so, that's okay. Put it in there, because you got to live your life. And then what our system does is it then calculates this and pulls in. See, the next thing we do is we pull in syllabus information and class schedule information, and we break it all down into manageable tasks. Now, what I mean by that is we take a class that a student has told us their strengths and their weaknesses, and what is easy, medium, or hard for them. So we have an algorithm that makes recommendations on how much homework that they should be doing. And then we break everything into manageable tasks. So if it's a test, and we know how big of a test it is, we can recommend how much study time you need to study for it. And then we break that up into 1-hour segments, 30-minute segments, 90-minute segments, whatever your attention span can tolerate. If it's a term paper, we break that up into manageable tasks. So if you have a term paper that's due on April 1st, what you will see in your calendar is maybe on March 10th, research term paper. The next day, outline term paper. The next day, first draft term paper. The next day, edit first term paper. And there are all these manageable little steps so that come April 1st, you have a term paper. Now, many kids don't want to study that way. They want to be the weekend warrior, and they want to do it all in one day. And if they want to do that all in one day, you need to let them do it all in one day. It's important for them to be in the driver's seat here. But many times, when they see it on their calendar and they see that visual of what it will look like to spend 10 hours a day working on something, oftentimes they change their mind. But if they don't, that's okay. The key to it is, whether or not you're using a Google Calendar or whatever you might be doing, break it up into manageable tasks with break times in between. Now, that's not ideal, because when you study a lot of information in a short period of time, you're memorizing it. And so chances are, if you're getting ready for a test, and that's kind of your MO, you'll do okay on the test if you spend a lot of time memorizing it. But you're just memorizing it. You're not learning it. You learn the information when you study it over a longer period of time. That's how it gets into your long-term memory. And that is key when your kid goes to college, because in college, you have cumulative finals. And you need to remember everything that happened the entire semester. So it's a much better way of learning your information. And personalizing it. Knowing your personal learning style is also key. Let me tell you another story about my son. When he was a freshman, he was taking a meteorology class. And he loves this stuff. He knows it really, really well. And it came time for his first midterm. And he took the midterm, and he scored a 61. Now, thank God he had a professor that saw beyond that test score. And she called him into her office, and she said, Anthony, I don't get it. You participate in the classroom. You know this information. You like this information. What happened? And she asked him a couple of questions from the test, which he got right off the bat. Then she proceeded to give him the entire test verbally. Now, his score went from a 61 to an 84. Now, he learned that day that he was a verbal learner. And from that moment on, he always emails his professors and asks them if they will give him a test verbally. Now, 50% of them say yes, and 50% of them say no. But it can mean an entire grade higher if a professor is willing to do that. Now, is this something that is going to affect him his entire life when he gets into the workplace? No, probably not. But this is something that could have derailed him in college. So it's super important to know that. And also want to touch upon one other thing with this meteorology class. The importance of specializing and taking classes that are of interest to you. What I did for Anthony was, before we went out to move him in, they sent us his schedule in the mail, which consisted of 5 just basic freshman classes, core classes. What I did was I called the school and I asked them, can we flip out an English class and a science class, and can we put in 2 classes in his area of interest? And so they offered up this meteorology class and an airline operations class, both of which he took. So he had 3 core classes and then these 2 other classes that he really enjoyed. And that made his semester so much more enjoyable, because at least he was engaged and interested in some of the classes. So that's also really important. Next is mobile. And mobile is key. This is where these kids live and breathe. Right now, we're working with about 60 students, and 80% of them rely on their mobile device for support. What our mobile device does is it really takes that Word document, that to-do list, and puts it on a mobile device. And rather than having to send that mobile device or send that to-do list back to me every night, what our system does is when you finish something, you swipe it and it just goes away. But if you do something, say you're studying for a math test, and you get done with your hour of studying, but now you need to go to class, and you're not done studying, you swipe it and you can add more time. You can add as much time as you need. You can add it immediately, the next day, later on in the day, or you can pick a specific date and time. And again, the key is so that they don't forget. Or You're supposed to be studying for a math test from 1 to 2. 1 to 2 comes and goes. You were on Instagram. You were hanging out with your friends, whatever. Well, then you swipe it again, and you reschedule it. And our system just picks it up and moves it. You can move it to later on in the day, move it to the next day, the weekend. You can pick a particular point in time. But again, the key to this all is not to let anything fall through the cracks. Because when things start to fall through the cracks, it's like this spiral. And then they get very overwhelmed, and then they begin to disengage. The other thing that we do is we send reminders. Reminders of when to turn in assignments, reminders to study for tests, one test star. In 2011, Google did not have this feature, but they have it now, and it's really cool. You can create a calendar entry in Google, and you can attach a phone number to it, and it will send you a reminder of that calendar entry. The next thing, if your executive functioning is weak, you will benefit greatly from having a coach. In 2011, Stanford did a study, and they studied a large group of kids, and they gave them all an academic coach, and they studied the same amount of kids without an academic coach. And they watched them for 18 months. And after 18 months, they found that retention rates for the kids who had an academic coach improved by 15%, and graduation rates improved by 13%. A coach is great at making sure you stay on track. When you have a coach, and in our system we have a dashboard, but the coach can watch for things. If you're moving homework assignments around a lot, if you're asking for a lot more time, a coach can step in and intervene before you take the test. So before you get into an academic failure situation. Now, a coach, obviously, the temperament of the child and the coach is obviously key. Now, I was really lucky. I was able to be my son's coach, and I was able to go on this journey with him. But that is not often the case. And I know that for a fact because I also have a daughter, and her name is Sydney, and she's going to be a freshman here next year. And I know she's going to need a coach, and I know it's not going to be me because we would kill each other. Let me tell you another story about Harry. Harry's a kid that I've been working with for about a year. Harry was a rock star in high school. He got all A's, 4.2 GPA, all AP classes, Eagle Scout, definitely sat on the pedestal of the perfect student. Well, Harry started college, and he hit the wall, and he started to fail. And I put Harry on the same system that I created for Anthony. And all of a sudden, his life became doable. Everything made sense. When I first started working with Harry, he was super embarrassed because he knew he was capable of so much more. He knew he was a smart kid. And he couldn't figure out why he couldn't get this part. And all he could do was regret the day that he needed to go home and show his parents his report card. Harry was yearning for a sense of well-being. Now, Harry and I talked every Friday at 2 o'clock. And we would talk about his classes, what was happening next week, things that were making him nervous. We'd move some homework things around. Sometimes he studied best right after class. Other times he needed a longer break, depending on the class and what type of homework assignment he was working on. Writing was hard for him, so we always put those in a special place. But there were times, many times, when Harry and I, in my opinion, did not need to talk at Friday at 2 o'clock. But Harry always wanted to have that call, even if we didn't have anything to say to each other. And I think it's because he didn't feel alone. And I think it's because he knew I was on his team, and that really meant something to him. What I'm talking about is a workable system. But there are so many well-meaning educators that believe that a kid should get this in a 2-hour time management class. Because after all, they're smart. They just got into college. and they're adults pretty much. And this is easy stuff. Well, the truth of the matter is, it is easy. It is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. However, if your executive functioning is weak, if it's underdeveloped, it takes time, dedication, and effort to make all of this become a habit. So I personally think it's time for people to stop getting angry that these kids don't get it and to give them a tool that helps them develop their executive functioning muscle. Now, you would never get to the Olympics without a coach. That would be unheard of. And it certainly isn't shined upon to get your kid an athletic coach or a personal trainer to help improve their athletic ability by just this much. Well, then why is it that we are enabling our kids? We're enabling them if we provide them with organizational support. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to do the work for them, and I'm not saying we're going to solve this problem for them. All I'm saying is let's give them a tool so that they can show us their true potential. I want to bring executive functioning into the realm of normal. Because when you do that, the results are outstanding. Okay, so now I want to take a few minutes and have some Q&A, and then we will close with, I have one final story and 3 takeaways for you. But right now we can start with if anybody has any questions. Yes?
Can we get that system right now?
If you fill out that card, what we're doing, I don't have a system that's available to the public, and I won't have that for a while. However, we are beta testing it right now in 6 colleges, and starting in the fall, with a select group of people, we are selling it to a select group. So all you need to do is fill out that card, and yes, we have a high school version and a college version that we'll be implementing in the fall.
It's a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm curious about the, like I think you said 1 in 4 kids don't make it through their freshman year, and what was it, like only 56% actually graduate after 5 years?
Yeah.
Have those statistics changed over time? I mean, what is it? Our expectations are different, or is it seems really surprising how
Grim, I know. The 56% is a pretty stagnant number. I mean, that really hasn't changed. And what was shocking to me was that college tuition rates have gone up 117%. Yet our graduation rates remain flat. They're completely flat. The 1 in 4 kids that don't make it back their freshman year, yeah, that's pretty much a standard statistic. Now, I think it's because a lot more kids are going to college. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, it was, almost more of a little bit of an elite group, and now so many kids are going. A lot of first generation, the statistics for first generation college students, that's another one that kills me. So it's 25% of kids don't make it back their freshman year. However, if you're a minority, underprivileged, first generation college student, 73% do not make it back their freshman year.
Are they working while they're in school? I mean, like outside jobs for money?
Yeah, the majority of those kids are working. They don't have a support system at home. They don't have anybody telling them how to do things. Oftentimes they're going to colleges that are, community colleges that don't have a lot of support built into the system. Yeah.
So what are the kids supposed to do after graduation without a system or without a coach? How are they supposed to function?
When they graduate from college?
Yes.
Oh.
No, when they graduate from college without like a system telling them when to study, when to go to class, when to do their paper.
Well, let me tell you about my son. This is really on the last slide, but I'm going to tell you now.
I have another comment about like freshmen having coaches, like high school coaches. That is not normal. It's not typical. And I don't know. It's
well, let me tell you an interesting statistic. 50% of all college students at some point in time rely on the help of a tutor or a coach. Now, a tutor or a coach, now that may not be their full 4 years, but 50% rely on somebody to give them some sort of support.
Tutor, yeah. No, but I seriously, like if these kids need everything spelled out and planned and programmed, how are they, you know, we need to teach them how to function like without a system.
Exactly. Well, I have a son who now, I mean, this whole thing started with my son. My son now finished his 4th year of college. If you looked at his calendar, it would look anything different than what your calendar looks like or what my calendar looks like. And I watched semester after semester as the scaffold team came down and came down and came down. My kid now knows to think backwards. He sees a test date, he looks at his calendar, and he knows to schedule backwards so he knows when to start studying for that test. And I can tell you that my kid never stays up all night studying for an exam. He doesn't stay up all night scrambling to get a term paper done. And that's a life skill. I mean, that's a skill that will lead him off into, you know, his career. So it's not, I'm not saying that this is something that they need their entire life. What I'm saying is this is an area of their brain that hasn't developed yet, and they're not going to learn it through failure. They're going to learn it by putting together a roadmap that makes it all worthwhile, and it makes it all make sense, and they follow that roadmap. And they follow it.
When does it develop? Like 25?
They say between the ages of 18 and 26. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier your son struggled in math. What are some tools that you put in place to assist him in that? Because my son is excelling in everything else but math.
Math is hard. I got him a math tutor before he even walked foot in the door of his college. And I thought that was really all that he would need. There's an app called Study Blue. My son used that a lot. That really helped. Study Blue is a very cool way.
Like the color blue?
Yes, Study Blue, S-T-U-D-Y-B-L-U-E. And it's an app where you can create online flashcards. So he would be on his phone and he could be testing himself and just kind of, you know, kind of continue to work on it. It's an interesting app that you can kind of use throughout your day if you really need a lot more support in a particular subject. But it was really a tutor. It was a tutor that could break down math and explain it to him in a way that made sense. So for example, my kid's love of life is aviation. So this tutor, and my son had to take a couple calculus classes, but they were measuring runways, and I mean, she was taking everything and applying it to what his level of interest was. Baseball, that's another thing he's interested in. So they would go with statistics in baseball. So she brought in topics that were interesting to him, and that helped. Yeah?
You know, well, beginning in middle school, my wife and I were addressing this issue of executive function with the staff and with the teachers, and that has continued here at Tam High. And with a few exceptions, it seems like the teachers have a hard time understanding the challenges that a student faces if they have executive function issues. And so part of our energy has not only been spent on dealing with our son and helping him through this process and teaching him some skills, but it's also trying to teach the teachers. We bring articles in every year. We give articles to all the teachers, and they take the article. I doubt if 50% of them have ever bothered to read it. That's the feeling or the sense I get, because we keep on revisiting the same issues with the teachers about the techniques and the skills that need to be used to get our son to the next level. And so I think it's a big issue for teaching, and I hope that when you give these lectures, you sometimes get teachers in the audience to listen to some of these issues, because the parents certainly know about it, and the parents are struggling with this issue.
Yeah.
And if the teachers don't become part of the team, so to speak, it just makes it that much more challenging.
It's hard. Yeah, no, it's very hard.
Yeah.
And I wish I could tell you it gets better in college, but it doesn't. They're the same. And you know, as I said with my son, I mean, you know, he has a particular way of taking a test that works for him. And 50% of those teachers, they understand it. And it's like, if this is going to help you, why not? You know, I mean, you're a visual learner. I'm a verbal learner. Does that mean that you're smarter than me or I'm smarter than you? Absolutely not. It just means that we perform at a higher potential when given an information in a different way. And many teachers, you know, embrace that, but others don't. And it's hard. Yes?
I imagine you've done a lot of research on this, and I'm curious. It seems that the success of colleges would be very important in having successful students that were graduating and going on to good jobs and whatever. What are you finding, if anything, that colleges are doing to support the students that are there? Are they, you know, peer support, counselors, and things like that, or do they not do that?
Some are. Some have first-year programs where you get a freshman advisor. Some have, a lot of them now are doing these University 101 classes where a freshman is a one-credit course, and they talk a lot about, it's really how to work the college system, how to pick your major, how to find the tutoring center, how to find the writing center. But again, these classes will spend literally 2 days teaching time management. And they give these kids a sheet of paper, and they have them do a little math homework on how many hours they are in class, and that's how many hours they should be spending doing their homework. And here's a calendar, plan it all out. But the problem is it's not a cookie-cutter solution. It's a real personalized solution. And if you got a college with 20,000 kids, it's hard to teach it at that personal level, because what works for one kid doesn't work for the other. I think it's really hard for a college to teach it because it is so personalized. But it's, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, colleges, if you can just improve their retention rates by 1%, I mean, it saves them millions upon millions of dollars. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're developing a cloud application, basically? You're developing
A what? I'm sorry?
cloud-based application?
Yeah, it's a web-based application that sits in the cloud. It's web and it's a mobile app.
So will this be a subscription model, or how do you plan to roll it out?
Yeah, it will be a subscription model, an annual subscription model. There'll be a standalone product, which is just the app, or there's the module with the coach if you want to utilize the coach. Yeah.
So if my son's not going to a school that's doing a lot of your beta tests,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything out there that you would recommend because it's not as good as yours as a stopgap measure?
Oh, we're not, you don't have to be at any particular college to use this product. I mean, and this is personal for me. I mean, my thing is I want to help every kid that needs help, and I don't want a kid to have to go to a certain school to be able to get any type of help. So if a college uses it, you know, that's great, but it's totally independent of a school. You don't need to be at any particular school to use it.
Carolyn, I was really struck when you described the 2 o'clock in the morning stuff. How did your son not experience you as a helicopter parent when you were doing all that?
He wasn't picking up the phone. I wasn't talking to him.
So the texting provided enough distance or something, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I know. As a matter of fact, I mean, my phone calls, which they were in the beginning, I'm like, you know, I was calling him like crazy. He backed away from all of that and backed away very quickly. I mean, he became highly annoyed with that. So, so no. But it's amazing. I mean, you know, I texted him, and you know, he got right on it. So I don't know. I think it takes the mother out of it. Same with my daughter. She'll be in her bedroom and text her, "Hey, clean your room." Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Yeah.
Do you know what your costs are yet?
I beg your pardon?
What your fees are?
You know what? If you fill out your card, I will send you some information, because we're doing a fall pilot program for high school students and college students, and that's for kind of it's not available to the public yet. That's just for a number of people, and it's not what our standard pricing is going to be. We haven't quite set that yet. But if you leave the card with Meredith, I can send you that information tomorrow. Okay. So before I close, I just want to tell you my personal story and then give you 3 takeaways, and then we'll be good to go. This has become my personal mission. And to tell you a little bit about myself, I come from a super dysfunctional family. There was nobody in my house telling me to do my homework. There was nobody in my house checking that I did my homework. And there was really nobody even in my house telling me that I should go to college. So when I graduated from high school, I went to, and I barely graduated from high school, but I went to a community college, and halfway through the semester, I failed and I had to drop out. And I dropped out because I couldn't manage the transition from high school into college. I was completely lost. So I dropped out. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And I eventually enrolled in Heald Business College, which after 18 months would give me the ability to go out and get a job as an office assistant. Now, when I was in Heald, I got all A's. Now, why was that? Well, 2 reasons that now make sense to me. Number 1, I was taking business courses, and those were super interesting to me. And those were the only courses I was taking. And number 2, I had this external structure brought back into my life. Heald operated its school much like a corporation. I went to school Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. I went to classes, I did homework, I went to classes, I did homework. Everything was built around this external structure. And that worked for me. Now, does that mean that I was more stupid than my friends that went off to a 4-year college? No, probably not. Does it mean that if I was given a little bit of support, could I have made it through a 4-year college? Yeah, I think I probably could. Now, what I lacked in executive functioning, I made up for in creativity. I mean, I'm fortunate. I do have a creative side to me. I have a street smart side to me. And I also fall into that very lucky category of people that were able to make it despite it all. So when I became a parent, I did a 180. I wanted to do anything humanly possible to help my kid. And now it's not just my kid. Now it's all kids. Just this past January, I was at Duke University. They're one of our beta test sites. And I had the opportunity to spend the day with these freshman advisors that were meeting with these freshmen coming back in for their 2nd term. And it was hysterical because it was a revolving door of Anthony's. They all came in, their shoulders were down, they looked dazed and confused, like they had the wind knocked out of them, and they sat down and their story was the same. They were so stressed out, they had no idea how to manage the transition. And they were looking for something, anything, that could provide them with support, that could make it all make sense to them so that they could have a successful freshman year. So now it's my mission that every kid starting their freshman year actually finishes their freshman year. Just think for a moment, what if every kid graduated from college with a degree that matched their true potential? What if we had 50% more engineers or people in STEM? What would our world look like? I think we'd have 10 times more Steve Jobs. How many young sons and daughters do we have out there that are not reaching their full potential? It's my mission to bring executive functioning into the realm of normal and change the conversation when you talk about kids like Anthony and Harry. Because when you give them the proper support, emotional and intellectual energy takes the place of stress and shame. They're relieved. They become more confident. And contradictory to what most people think, it increases their independence. Now, I want to give you 3 takeaways to think about when you leave this evening. Number 1, your job doesn't end when your kid gets accepted into college. Be there for them during the transition and pay attention during the transition. Be curious, not critical. If you think your kid is lazy, dig deeper. Look for early warning signs. And don't wait for the colleges to pick up on this, because chances are it might be too late. And be proactive and not reactive. But most of all, understand and know that executive functioning, underdeveloped executive functioning, masks real intelligence. The flip side to this is brilliance. And when you know your limitations, you can use them to your advantage. And most of all, this has absolutely nothing to do with your kids' intelligence. In fact, your kids are probably smarter than you think they are. This is Anthony now, all grown up. And other than his executive functioning struggles his freshman year, he was a typical freshman. He put on the freshman 20. He experienced his first hookah lounge. He overdrew his bank account more times than I care to discuss. And he probably did 100 other things that I don't need to know about. But those are the things that he needs to figure out on his own. And as I said before, now he doesn't need the support that he needed his freshman or his sophomore or even his junior year. I mean, his calendar looks relatively like anybody's calendar might look like. And I go back to, don't we all rely on something to help keep us organized? I mean, how many of us use an online calendar? How many of us use a contact manager because we don't remember phone numbers anymore? How many of us use fitness trackers to tell us when and how to work out? So I'm going to tell you one final story. And it's the last day of Anthony's freshman year. I went back to his school to help him pack up and move his items into storage. And as we packed everything up, and as we walked through that door, he taps me on the shoulder. And I turn around and I look at him, and he has tears in his eyes. And he just says to me very calmly, "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." And quite honestly, that thank you changed my life. That thank you is why I'm here today. That thank you is why I did a lot of work, so hopefully you don't have to. That thank you is why I want to change the way for all kids and make it all possible for them all to succeed. So I appreciate you sharing your evening with me. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.